Well, actually, I'd like to answer you by actually taking it back a little further. The whole history of Orthodox seminaries in North America. Um, as you know, I used to be the dean of St. Herman's Seminary in Kodiak, and when I was in Alaska, I was blessed to actually serve in the chapel of what's called the Russian Bishop's House in what's now Sitka. It was New Archangel. The church doesn't own that property anymore. It's in the National Park Service, but they're very generous to let us use that chapel with the censer and other things that were St. Innocent's. But in that big complex, there is the first seminary in North America. And it's fascinating when you read the curriculum. Like, I was like a little puzzled when I saw that hygiene was a big part of the original curriculum. But when you think about a seminary in a missionary situation in those dates, yes, they needed to know how to treat injuries and other such things. Um, and, just to be able to sit in that room, as I was able to do, you could sense that this was a place of prayer, a place of education, and it's where I really was impressed as someone who continues to work in priestly formation in a seminary context. St. Innocent reminded everyone that in order for Orthodoxy to thrive in this new cultural environment, you needed to do three things, and you needed to recruit men for the priesthood from the local population. Second, he said they needed to be educated in a local seminary, not sending them abroad. And third, he said we need to learn to teach and preach in the language that the people understand. And that was our model. It's still an excellent model. I think that particularly the third point has been expanded beyond speaking a particular language, because we just had to learn to communicate in varieties of ways that social media challenges us, the generational differences challenge us. But eventually the seminary was moved to Minnesota, and we actually have a brick outside the bookstore here that was salvaged from that original building. It was then relocated to Tenafly, New Jersey. And then along comes the Bolshevik Revolution. And, no longer is there, the Tsar's purse and other such things to support the institutions. So we had a very dry period between the Bolshevik Revolution, 1917, 1918, through the founding of two seminaries, which I'll get to in 1938. It's very interesting there in that period between 1917 and 1938. Some American Orthodox were trained abroad, but many went to Anglican seminaries, in particular Nashotah House, the Anglo-Catholic seminary in Wisconsin that I know very well. And at the seminary, there's quite a large icon of the three hierarchs. And when you read the inscription on the back, it was given by the Orthodox students in the graduating class of 1928. So I have a deal with the folks at Nashotah House that if for some reason they go under, we get that icon. So in 1938, the Metropolia, when you read the founding documents, the exchanges of the time as they came to make those decisions about reconstituting institutions to move us forward in priestly formation, theological education, the documents say something that I think is so significant. The bishops knew that America would become a highly educated society, and therefore we needed a highly educated clergy in order to present orthodoxy in that particular context. That's really quite visionary. So they used the Russian model, and they founded two schools, St. Tikhon's, outside the monastery in South Canaan, Pennsylvania. They used what is called in the Russian tradition the pastoral school model. It was not to be a school of higher education, but it was to be a place kind of like an extended high school, where men would be taught the rubrics and chanting and formed for pastoral ministry that way. There was also the Russian model for the academy, and that's what they said that their hopes for St. Vladimir's would be. There were only a handful of academies in the Russian tradition. There was Moscow, the Kiev Academy, St. Petersburg, Kazan. We actually achieved that status in 1948. and we used to use the term St. Vladimir's Academy, but in American English it took a different turn, and so these days people don't understand academy as versus the word seminary. You know, we talk about Little Lamb's Academy or something like that. So when I'm abroad, I have to make sure that I explain that to everyone, because abroad, seminary basically means more or less a high school education. I think the root word for seminary, you know, is very fascinating because it's, you know, it's connected to seminal and the garden and the place where you plant the seed like in a greenhouse and grow it up to full maturity. And that's really what we do here. Mm-hmm. So that's the early history of St. Vladimir's. Would you like me to take it a little further?
Sure, yeah.
So when you look at our history, we had a period of time when we were at General, the Episcopalian Seminary down in the city. We then went to Union Seminary for a period of time. Incredible stories about those days. Prominent theologians, you know, arriving from, say, St. Serge in Paris, discovered that, oh, in this apartment we also have 3 seminarians, in addition to that academic and his family. The library was so thin that they actually used an old bathroom that was adequate. And I'm also told that, you know, there were books that were sort of stored in the old bathtub that were there. So we've come a long ways. We then had an association with Columbia University, which was quite nice because it meant that you could get a dual degree, because we became the institution for higher education, which means that you must have your undergraduate, your baccalaureate degree to apply for graduate work here. And then in 1962, we purchased the property in Crestwood/Yonkers, New York. It was St. Eleanor's Convent, which had been a home for unwed mothers. There was the main building, which is now called Germac, and a small Roman Catholic chapel. And that's how we began in 1962. Of course, great figures, names associated with St. Vladimir's. I often reference people when they ask me the question you've asked about the history of St. Vladimir's. A book that was edited by Paul Gavriluk, titled On Christian Leadership. It's published by SVS Press. It documents the exchange and the tensions between Father George Florovsky and Father Alexander Schmemann. And to basically sort of give you the Reader's Digest condensed version of that exchange, it was pretty clear that Florovsky saw St. Vladimir's becoming very much in the image of Harvard or Princeton, that it would be at that sort of level of academic rigor and studies. Schmemann's vision was more, yes, a high academic bar, but essential pastoral formation, especially for priestly ministry. And Schmemann tagged into some of the conversation of the founding in 1938. The bishop said that this institution needed to be missional. The one organization that was really engaging the American culture and presenting orthodoxy within that cultural context. And that's why they chose St. Vladimir as the patron, because 1938 was the 950th anniversary of the baptism of the Rus. And so they said the school needed a missional patron. So Schmemann picks up on that. And in the end, those tensions, it was Schmemann who prevailed, although he was much younger than Florovsky, but it was his vision of a place of yes, as I said, high academic standing, but formation into pastoral ministry. Schmemann, you know, borrowing from St. Basil the Great, said that the seminary needed to know 3 paths: to the chapel, to the classroom, and to the library. And that really is the kind of balance that we were built upon. And then, you know, continuing that legacy down through, you had, you know, Father John Meyendorff, again with a strong academic emphasis here, association with Fordham University, then the Hopko era, and of course Father Hopko was the pastor par excellence. I understand still the most popular voice heard on Ancient Faith Radio as a podcaster.
I believe it.
So he brought another kind of balance and things, very much like his father-in-law, Father Alexander. then passing through the time of John Erickson, a former church history professor, and arriving at the double-headed eagle, the period where I was the chancellor, Father John Baer was dean. And in 2016, the board again made another decision, which was to sort of align the governance model of St. Vladimir's with what I would say 85% of the other accredited seminaries in North America follow, which is the model of a president and then his direct reports, including an academic dean and others. And that's, again, it's part of keeping pace with just the demands of modern times, because things have changed so rapidly. The Master of Divinity degree, which is one of the degrees we offer here, it's the normal ordination track degree. You can imagine how it's had to be sort of reinvented almost every year to keep pace with the challenges of the 21st century.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for by way of clarification, the genesis of St. Vladimir's was in Kodiak. And then they moved from there to Minnesota?
Actually in Sitka.
In Sitka.
Yeah, that was the first Orthodox seminary for North America.
Okay.
I'd say actually if there's such a genesis for St. Vladimir's, it would be Saint Serge in Paris. Because, after the Bolshevik Revolution, there was what would we call the sort of Parisian school that developed there. And that's where Florovsky, Schmemann, Meindorf, they all came out of that collection of great Russian minds and figures and people. And it was transferred here.
Yeah, okay. And what was the seminary named in Sitka?
In Sitka, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was probably New Archangel, just like the town.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until later, 1938, that it was made St. Vladimir's.
Yes, the one in Tenafly, New Jersey was St. Platon.